The diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge hummed with the quiet efficiency of 100 different species coexisting in carefully measured proximity. Haley Martinez wiped the sweat from her brow as she finished her shift in the agricultural bay. Her boots caked with the nutrient-rich soil that fed half the ship's population. The Zenith delegates had been particularly demanding today, insisting that their ceremonial grains required exactly 0.3% more humidity than the environmental controls allowed. She trudged back to her quarters, nodding at Tiago Chen as he passed in the corridor. The security officer gave her a tired smile, his hand resting casually on the neural stunner at his hip. "Long day?" he asked. "The Zenith are convinced I'm trying to poison their harvest," Haley replied, rolling her eyes. U3 disputes over territory markings, 2 accusations of thought crime, and 1 ambassador who insists that breathing the same air as a class of an predator species violates their religious code. Tiago shook his head. "Sometimes I miss Earth." Earth had mosquitoes, Haley reminded him. Fair point. They parted ways, and Haley palmed open her door, stepping into the blissful silence of her private space. It wasn't much: a sleeping platform, a small desk, a sanitation unit, and a storage locker, but it was hers. She kicked off her boots with a satisfied sigh, leaving them by the door as she headed for the shower. The hot water was a luxury she never took for granted. Most species aboard the Harmony's Edge found the human preference for regular bathing bizarre, wasteful, or both. But Captain Oren had approved the modification to human quarters after the incident, where 3 different delegations had filed formal complaints about the wet mammal smell. Haley emerged feeling almost human again, dressed in her sleep clothes, and collapsed onto her sleeping platform. The soft hum of the ship's engines lulled her toward sleep, and within moments she was dreaming of home. Morning came with the artificial dawn of her quarters' lighting system. Haley stretched, yawned, and swung her legs off the platform. Her daily routine was sacred: get dressed, grab her boots, head to the mess hall for whatever passed as coffee this cycle, then report to the agricultural bay. She padded over to where she'd left her boots by the door and reached for the right one. It was heavier than expected, much heavier. Frowning, Haley peered inside. 2 enormous amber eyes stared back at her. She yelped and dropped the boot. A small, furry creature tumbled out, landing on its feet with surprising grace. It was about the size of a house cat, covered in midnight blue fur with silver striations, and possessed far too many teeth for Haley's comfort. 6 legs, she counted, retractable claws, and those eyes' vertical pupils that marked it unmistakably as a predator. The creature made a sound somewhere between a chirp and a growl, then sat down and looked at her expectantly. "Oh no," Haley whispered. "Oh no. She recognized the species. Krillian shadows, native to the forest moon of Krill 4, apex predators that could take down prey 3 times their size. The Krillian ambassador, Vorshik, had been aboard for 2 weeks with his family unit. This was his cub. It had to be. Haley's mind raced through the implications. Krillians were notoriously protective of their young. If they discovered a human had been harboring, or worse, might have harmed one of their cubs, it could trigger a diplomatic incident, possibly a war. The Krillian Empire didn't take kindly to threats against their offspring. The cub chirped again, and batted at her bare foot with 1 paw, claws carefully retracted. "Okay," Haley said, mostly to herself. "Okay, think. You need to return this little killing machine to its family before anyone notices. It's missing," quietly, calmly, without causing an intergalactic incident. She reached for her communicator, then hesitated. Official channels would mean reports, investigations, and questions about how a predator cub had breached her quarters' security. Better to handle this personally. Haley pulled on her other boot and scooped up the cub, who immediately began purring a sound like distant thunder. She wrapped it in a spare towel and tucked it against her chest, praying to every deity she could remember that no one would notice. The corridors were busier than she'd hoped. Haley kept her head down, walking with purpose toward the Krillian delegation's quarters on Deck 7. The cub seemed content to stay hidden, occasionally kneading its claws against her arm through the towel. "Haley," she froze. Tiago was approaching from the opposite direction, his expression curious. "Hey, you look stressed," he said, falling into step beside her. "Everything okay?" "Fine, totally fine. Just, returning some ... laundry." She clutched the towel tighter as the cub shifted. Tiago's eyes narrowed. "That towel's moving." "Static cling," Haley said desperately. "You know how it is with the ship's dryers." Before Tiago could respond, the cub's head popped out from the top of the towel, chittering happily at the security officer. Is that Tiago's hand moved to his stunner? "Don't," Haley hissed. It's Ambassador Vorshek's cub. It must have wandered into my quarters last night. I'm trying to return it before anyone panics. Tiago stared at her, then at the cub, then back at her. Slowly, his hand moved away from the weapon. You know what? I didn't see anything, but for the record, you're insane. Noted, Haley said gratefully. They reached the Krillian quarters together. Tiago took up position outside while Haley requested entry. The door opened to reveal Vorshek himself, massive, 8 feet tall, covered in the same midnight blue fur as the cub, but threaded with scars and age. His eyes fell on the bundle in Haley's arms, and his entire body went still. Ambassador, Haley began, her voice remarkably steady, I believe this belongs to you. He found his way into my quarters last night and fell asleep in my boot. I wanted to return him safely. For a long moment, Vorshek said nothing. Then he reached out with one massive paw and gently lifted the cub from Haley's arms. The little creature chirped and immediately began climbing up to perch on his father's shoulder. My youngest, Vorshek said finally, his voice a deep rumble. He has been fascinated by humans since we boarded. I apologize for any distress. No distress, Haley interrupted quickly. He was very well behaved. Sweet, actually. Vorshek's expression was unreadable by human standards, but something in his posture shifted. You did not harm him. You did not panic or raise an alarm. You simply returned him. Of course, Haley said, confused. He's a child. The ambassador was quiet for another moment. Then he placed one massive paw over his chest in what Haley recognized as a Krillian gesture of respect. The Empire will remember this kindness, Haley Martinez. You have done what many species would not trust a predator in your most vulnerable space. As Haley walked back to her quarters with Tiago, she couldn't help but smile. Sometimes, she thought, diplomacy wasn't about protocols and treaties. Sometimes it was about waking up to find a monster in your boot and choosing to see a child instead. So, Tiago said casually, breakfast. Breakfast sounds perfect, Haley replied, and maybe something stronger than coffee. Behind them, in the Krillian quarters, Ambassador Vorshek held his youngest cub close and made a mental note to inform the Empire's Council. Humanity, he decided, was far more interesting than their files suggested, and far more dangerous in the ways that truly mattered. They befriended apex predators without thinking twice. Perhaps the old saying was true. The most dangerous species in the galaxy weren't those who hunted. They were those who made everyone else want to be their friend.